So this is from some guy named Greg Swaim. Apparently, he is a longtime college football radio host.
And it's kind of being corroborated by seemingly now everyone. Isn't it interesting when someone comes out and says something and then like you get like 50 people that are like, oh, well, we've long known that. And this is, and then why weren't you saying it? And they're like, well, we were, you just weren't listening. So
right, unless it's from Schefter or Woj or whoever, then we're like, well, we either thought that or we've known this all along. But, that person doesn't get the credit.
Yeah, so Greg Swaim, I don't know who Greg Swaim is, but he dropped the bombshell of all conference realignment bombshells this week, revealing that both the Big Ten and the SEC have turned down Florida State and Clemson. And the Big 12 is now in pursuit of 6 ACC teams. He says, as we've said for a year, Florida State and Clemson will not get a Big Ten offer due to neither being AAU accredited. But from Vegas, the talk is the SEC has now turned the pair down. With the new sponsorship, the Big 12 probably won't pay quite what the other two do, but with those two, they'll pay double what the ACC does, and it won't end there. The talk is the Big 12 will take 6 from the ACC. Swaim was confident in his prediction and relayed that the SEC and Big 10 might not add any new programs for a while.
Yeah, and so like I've tried to stay up on this, and again, there's so much information flying around, but I was kind of digging around on this, and I try to get a general consensus because you listen to 100 people and you get 100 different opinions, and everyone wants to do the either I was first or I've known this all along, but I just wasn't talking about it. But one of the kind of the general thought process that I keep seeing popping up over and over again is that by the way, the Big Ten not wanting them for academics is kind of one of those like, really? like you have I mean, I guess that's the snooty Pac-12 old edition, right? Like, well, we're academically we're better than you. So if that is, and by the way, that's the only reason I've heard for the Big Ten not having a real interest in these two, and that the Big Ten only wants to make one more addition, and that's Notre Dame. If they can get Notre Dame, great. And if not, the Big Ten's perfectly happy where they're at. They're leading the bus. They're the lead bus driver. They make more money than anyone else, and they don't really feel a need. This doesn't be a sense that Florida State and Clemson, it's not adding much. They feel like they are at where they're at. And again, it's splitting the pies multiple ways, and they don't love those schools academically, and they just don't believe that it adds that much more to the Big Ten when they already feel like they're the ones driving the bus. They also believe that the SEC never wanted them. So this is the other one. I think if the SEC were more interested in them, I think the Big Ten would be inclined to be like, okay, academics be damned, let's grab them. But it sounds like the SEC for two reasons. One, the SEC already owns those markets. They already have South Carolina and they already have Florida covered, and that you may have problems getting the number of votes to add those schools. The other one is the SEC and the ACC have long had a kind of a adversarial sort of thing, and it sounds like there's some people saying that the SEC loves the idea of the ACC in a civil war. And they also think it would be hilarious if Florida State and Clemson, who were pretty crowned up and always thinking that they're better than some of the SEC schools, there's a lot of talk that some of the people in the SEC think it'd be hilarious if they had to end up in the Big 12. Kind of like, oh, really? You guys think you're great? Well, have fun in the Big 12. So if the SEC really doesn't have interest because of geographical votes and the fact that they kind of feel like an ACC civil war would benefit them, and kind of a spite move for Florida State and Clemson, and the Big Ten not needing to grab them because they don't believe that the SEC is going to put them in, it really does only leave one landing spot, and that is the Big 12.
The Pac-12. Oh.
If only they had held it together. And while like you said, while the Big 12 is not a great landing spot, it's certainly a lot better than that horse crap contract that they're locked into at the ACC for like the foreseeable future.
Well, I think it'd be great for the Big 12.
Yes,
I mean,
they finally would have anchor schools.
They have a bunch of schools, but nobody's really that great. They're all kind of the same. Florida State and Clemson would be like,
They would be the anchor schools.
Yeah, besides Kansas, of course.
Of course. Rock Chalk.
Then this guy goes on to say that the SEC could have interest in North Carolina and Virginia if the Big 12 didn't take them because they believe. So Swaim is saying, this radio guy is saying that the Big 12 will get a bunch of money because of private equity, and that could lead to them really getting aggressive about adding schools and beefing up. And if they did not take North Carolina, Virginia, he is saying the SEC would have interest in those two because they want to get into those states. And
because again, Clemson and Florida State are already in markets that they're fine in.
Yeah, and their academics are good at those two schools.
Well, that's what you keep hearing. When the whole expansion talk was happening, they said that the one of the crown jewels wasn't necessarily Clemson or Florida State. It was North Carolina. Supposedly everyone wanted North Carolina. That was a school for academics and basketball and football that people were very high on. And, a geographical dominance there in the state.
I can see that.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm still fascinated with the idea of, and this is where I just scratch my head. The ACC deal runs through 2036. And Florida State and Clemson love to yell about suing and getting out of things. And every time the ACC just says, dude, you signed not one, but 2 extensions. Like, you have a contract. If you would like to leave, cool. We own your rights, or you give us $300 million. And Florida State and ACC are like, that's not fair. And the ACC just keeps saying, well, you signed the contract. So ACC's like, you need to negotiate, or the two schools like, you need to negotiate with us. And the ACC just doesn't seem to give a rip. So until that happens, I mean, all of this stuff is just kind of conjecture. I want to see the ACC actually allow them to buy their way out for less than $300 million, or Florida State and Clemson actually have the balls to go to court and think they're going to win. Because right now it just feels like there's 2 schools that love to yell about how their TV deal sucks. They're in it for another 10 plus years and they don't want to be in it anymore. But as of today, there's still nothing they can do about it besides writing a check for a couple $100 million.
But all the other schools, there was plenty they could do about it.
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't really get. I mean, I guess I do get the difference between Florida State and Clemson. There's a grant of rights,
a big
deal
one.
that's very
Huge.
hard to get out of, but it's not impossible to get out of. So yes, of course, all that is right. Yeah. Like, you signed it, but so did Oregon signing with the Pac-12, and so did Utah signing with the Pac-12, and so did.
That was one. That was.
But I just mean
1 or 2 years versus. 12.
Well, I know, but Texas, Ohio, or Oklahoma, it's all the same crap. They all just want what's best for them, and I do think it's kind of funny that Florida State and Clemson are, like, people are doing, like, we're now doing bits with realignment where the SEC is just like, ha ha ha, we just want you to stay over there and suffer, ha ha. You know, like, this is what it's come to, is that the SEC is just like, and now, I don't know. It's,
hey,
but it is
SEC's
kind
like,
of,
hey, Florida State, remember when you were bitching about us? Enjoy the Big 12, bitches.
It is kind of funny that Florida State and Clemson are the 2 schools that are kind of getting exposed a little bit. Like, I think it's funny that they're getting turned down by the 2 big boy conferences. Like, the Big Ten's like, yeah, you're too dumb for us. And listen, we went to I'm basing this off of one thing and one thing only. We went to a Rose Bowl where Oregon played Florida State, and let me tell you something. Those Florida State people are D-U-M dumb.
The learned people, no!
So I get where the Big Ten's coming on that, and I'm sure Clemson's about the same way. Yeah. So I think it's kind of funny that they're being exposed a little bit, but they'll, the Big 12 will be happy to have them. And
well, it's like when Oregon and Washington, for all of the bluster they brought, their Big Ten deal was pennies on the dollar. Everyone was like, and granted, the Big Ten, eventually gave them the invite, but it wasn't at full shares. I just think a lot of schools think that they carry more weight than they really do.
That's why it's funny that Florida State especially.
Yes.
That's why it's kind of funny that this is happening to them because they think they're like, Florida and Texas. And
it turns out both conferences kind of looked at them, at least according to one guy now, and then a bunch of people are doing it's long, but I can't say how many times I read, it's long been known that the SEC was not interested in Florida State. I'm like, really? Because that's not what I heard, but apparently that thought is out there.
I can see it. Like, it all makes sense.
It does when you put it together.
Now that you lay it out there.
Yeah. Because if the SEC was beating down their door, I'm sure the Big Ten would be like, all right, whatever. We can't allow the SEC to continue to because you add Texas and you add Oklahoma, and the Big 12 does what they do, and they grab USC and Oregon and Washington, and it is an arms race. And when you look at the really big powerhouses that are left, to be honest with you, the only ones that are really left are indeed Florida State, Clemson, and Notre Dame.
Well, they think they're powerhouses.
Yeah,
Notre Dame is.
Notre Dame is. Everyone would, and that's the best part too, is that Notre Dame is better than all of this because they're like, oh, we just have our own. Screw you, we don't need you. And maybe eventually they have to bend the knee, but as of right now, they haven't had to. But yeah, it would appear, though, Clemson with multiple national championships over the last handful of years, and Florida State, who is a traditional power and seems to be back on the rise, you would think that of the schools that are out there, they would by far be the most attractive, and yet both of the big boys are snubbing their nose at it.
I would be of the opinion that if Florida State and Clemson were really coveted by the SEC, they would have jumped. Now, they have the grant of rights thing, so maybe they couldn't have.
Yeah.
But I would imagine the SEC would have wanted them to jump in when Texas and Oklahoma did. I mean, those conversations happened. Like,
yes.
if the SEC really wanted Florida State and Clemson, I'm sure they've already circled the wagons on that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And tried to get them out of there. But the fact that they're not out of there, and now this is all coming out, maybe means that the SEC it's true that the SEC never wanted them in the first place.
Yeah, you're right.
Because they can get whoever they want.
The only thing holding this together is that the stupid ACC schools, I mean, you want to talk about, we can criticize the Pac-12 for being dumb, and they were, right? So many missteps. But boy, why don't we talk more about the ACC sitting down and signing a $31 million a year deal through 2036. Did you not?
Crazy.
Did no one think that TV money was going to get bigger? Were they just like, you know what, guys, this $30 million is pretty sweet. Nothing could possibly happen in college football to change.
Well,
like, that may be the dumbest.
It does show you how really bad some of these business decisions are.
Yes.
That really is a good highlight of it. Another one is, did you see recently this Penn State football stadium thing?
No, what did they do?
Well, they want $700 million of public money to to revamp their stadium.
Oh, geez.
$700 million.
That's a lot of dough.
And the AD, or one of the higher ups, came out and said, well, we project revenues in the year 2044. Seriously, she said that. She was like, yeah, well, we have this running at a 40. I think she said, we're going to be getting $44 million per year off of this in, I don't know, I think 30 years is what she said.
Yeah.
And people are like, dude, that's not even a thing. How can you even possibly predict that? 30 years ago was 1994.
Things have changed.
So if somebody in 1994 said, well, in 2024, we expect, what?
Yeah.
This is how dumb these people are. They have no business sense whatsoever. And that's how they're trying to sell, because the people are pushing back. They're like, dude, we're not paying for your $700 million for your stupid football stadium.
Exactly. How much does that school make?
And that was her thing, was, $44 million in 30 years we project.
Okay.
I project me being a multi-billionaire in 30 years. I'm not sure if it's going to happen, but why don't you give me $700 million and let me find out?
I just like to point out that their endowment is $5 billion.
God.
So, Penn State.
Some of these people. But you're right. In the end, let's wrap this up by saying, in the end, dude, the ACC schools should be getting out of there, because these TV contracts in college football, they are going to explode. Yeah. All of these schools. And this could include, for you Beaver fans and Cougar fans sitting on the sideline right now,
could be.
Dude, you could reap the benefits just as much as any other school out of all of this.
Yeah.
Because
you're probably actually rooting for the chaos.
Of course you are.
Because from the chaos, you need the deck to be reshuffled in the worst possible way. And the longer this goes unshuffled, the more you just kind of twist in the wind and die on the vine. So, Coug Beaver fan, this is your Super Bowl. You need chaos.
The dust will settle. As I've been saying all along, the dust is going to settle with 4 huge conferences. That's what it's going to be. Or maybe 3.
Or maybe 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Oregon State and Washington State go to the Big 12, perhaps. I don't know.
That would be the dream. Or you end up in kind of the bastard leftover kind of Big 4, more like,
well, that's what I was saying. Like that fourth league, I don't know if it's big,
it's
but
like the Mountain West
there will be
expanded.
some schools in there that will generate TV money.
Yeah.
All right, that is our college football crunch berries.